Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're digging into the science of stress and what it's actually doing to your brain. It's this wild story about a brilliant survival tool that, well, can sometimes turn on us.
So let's just jump right in with a question that might surprise you. I mean, is all stress really bad for you? We're always told to avoid it, right? But the biological reality, well, it's way more interesting and nuanced than that.
First things first, we've got to reframe how we think about stress. So instead of seeing it as this modern day villain, try thinking of it as your body's ancient, super effective alarm system. It's a brilliant protective tool that's really just trying to get your body back to balance, back to what's called homeostasis.
And at the heart of this whole alarm system is that classic fight or flight response we've all heard about. It's this deep, fundamental survival instinct that literally kept our ancestors alive for thousands of years and keeps us safe too. It's all about prepping your body to use a massive burst of energy to either face down a threat or, get the heck out of there. Okay, so how does this alarm actually work? Well, the second your brain even thinks there's a threat, it kicks off this powerful chain reaction of hormones. Your adrenal glands just dump adrenaline and cortisol into your system. And what does that do? It jacks up your heart rate, tightens your blood vessels, and shoots a bunch of sugar into your bloodstream for instant fuel. Boom, you are ready for action.
And here's where it gets really interesting. The surprising upside. This short-term stress, what we call acute stress, isn't just about surviving. It can actually make you better. That rush of stress hormones, it can literally help you lock in memories, so you learn really fast from a dangerous situation. Plus, it sharpens your focus like a laser beam. Kinda cool, right?
But what happens when that alarm system, the one that's so brilliant for short-term emergencies, just gets stuck in the on position? Right. This is where the story takes a much darker turn, and that useful tool, it starts to become a really destructive force. And this brings us to a really crucial difference, acute stress versus chronic stress. See, acute stress is good. It's adaptive. It's a quick response to an immediate problem. Chronic stress, though, that's the bad guy. It's this relentless, nonstop state of being on high alert. And over time, this leads to what scientists call allostatic load, which is basically just the wear and tear on your body from constantly gunning the engine. And that, right there, is the core issue. Our bodies are built to handle a quick sprint away from a saber-toothed tiger. Right? They are not built for the never-ending marathon of modern life. Money worries, stress at work, relationship drama. The system just wasn't designed for a threat that never, ever goes away. So let's take a look at how all this actually translates into physical changes inside the brain. Because this isn't just a feeling, being stressed out. Nope. It's a real biological process that can literally remodel our most important organ.
Okay, so to really get the damage, you first have to understand how the brain is even put together. And it builds itself from the bottom up. You start with the most primitive part, the brainstem, which just handles basic survival. Then comes the limbic system. That's where our emotions and connections live. And finally, on top of all that, you get the prefrontal cortex. That's our thinking brain, the part that does all the rational planning and uses language. And this is the absolute core of the problem. Chronic stress comes in and just hijacks that whole system. It forces the brain to operate almost entirely from survival mode. All the information, all your reactions, they get stuck down in those lower, primitive parts of the brain. So your brain basically becomes obsessed with one single question, over and over. Am I safe? And we're not just talking about feelings here. This stuff is structural. Chronic stress actually stops new neurons from growing in the hippocampus, which is so important for learning and memory, and in the prefrontal cortex, our decision-making center. But at the exact same time, the amygdala, the brain's little fear detector, it can actually grow bigger. And that leads to this constant state of high anxiety and fear. So, as you can imagine, all these physical changes have a really profound and honestly kind of confusing effect on our memory. It creates this weird internal world where some memories are just painfully crystal clear, while others are frustratingly fuzzy. And this leads us to this really weird paradox. On one hand, stress can supercharge your ability to lock in emotionally intense memories. It's why you can remember a traumatic moment with perfect, vivid clarity. But then, at the exact same time, that same stress can totally tank your ability to pull up other information, like, all the facts you crammed for an exam. So frustrating. What this does is create a really dangerous feedback loop.
Researchers have seen that once your brain tags something as dangerous, it starts paying way more attention to it. And of course, the more you stare at a supposed threat, the bigger and scarier it starts to look. Here's that vicious cycle in action. So, stress makes you zero in on threats. Focusing on those threats naturally makes you feel even more stressed. And what does more stress do? It makes you focus even harder on the threats. It just feeds on itself, this loop, and it can be incredibly tough to get out of. Okay, so after hearing all that bad news, the big question is, are we just stuck like this? If stress can literally damage the brain, can it also be healed? Well, the answer, thankfully, is a resounding yes. And the key lies in the brain's absolutely remarkable ability to change. That amazing ability is called neuroplasticity. It's this core idea that our brains aren't set in stone. Not at all. They are constantly rewiring and reorganizing themselves based on everything we experience. It's how we learn, how we adapt. It's how we recover. And this really is the most hopeful message in this whole explainer. The very same process, that neuroplasticity, that lets stress carve all those negative pathways in our brain, well, we can actually take control of it. We can use it to build new, healthier, and way more resilient pathways instead. So how do we actually do that? Well, here's a really practical way to think about it. Since stress hijacks the brain from the bottom up, healing has to go in the reverse order. I mean, you can't reason with someone who's in total survival mode, right? So first, you have to regulate. You calm that primitive survival brain with sensory stuff like deep breathing or a warm blanket. Then you relate. You connect with the emotional brain through feeling safe and reassured. And only then, once that alarm is finally turned off, can you get to the thinking brain to reason, reflect, and solve problems. So, what does this all mean in the end? It means we are not helpless victims of our own stress response. Not by a long shot. Our brains are incredible learners. And if they can learn stress, they can learn something else too. We have the power to actively take part in our own healing, to quiet that alarm, and to teach our brains new, stronger, more resilient ways of seeing the world.